Hello everybody! Welcome to my garden. This is Pam from Pam Crafted Journals, and I'm about to gather some plants and leaves and flowers for an eco boil or a leaf boil or whatever you want to call it, but that's what we're going to do. So this is just a quick shot of my garden and a variety of different flowers. We have morning glories and zinnias and cosmos and phlox and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I will go into it a little bit more in detail once we go inside to actually stack the flowers for the boil, but let's get started. I've got my nippers and I've got my pan from Goodwill that I'm going to put everything in. I just use that to gather up my flowers. So that being said, let's get started. Hi everybody, we're back and we're in my kitchen and I just want to go over some supplies with you. So what we have is the pan that I showed you earlier. That's what we're going to actually do the leaf boil in. You don't have to put a rack or a board in the bottom of your pan. I choose to. You can get a really cool sort of burnt effect on the bottom couple of pages if you don't. And you still do a little bit just because of the heat, even if you do put a rack in there. But I'm just going to use an old cookie rack just to get it up off the bottom a little bit. Plus, I like the way that it leaves lines on the paper from the boil. You don't have to use a cookie rack if you don't want to, like I said. I will sometimes use some boards like this placed under. You can actually see some of the leaf prints that actually stain the board at some point. I am opting not to use the boards this time just simply because they do make the water a lot murkier, which sometimes is the effect I want, but not today. So we're not going to use the board today. So you do need your pan, something in the bottom if that's what you would like. I usually have some sort of rusty element. I don't know the science behind it, but somehow the rust has some sort of reaction with the flowers that helps. I don't know what it is. I don't know. But I use it every once in a while in my boil. I have some really standard just printer paper. I also have a little bit of cream colored paper and then a little bit thicker cardstock that I might throw in once in a while. And then just sort of I don't know how to call it. It's just a white piece of paper with a little bit of pre-lining. I just wanted to experiment with some flowers and see how that turned out. So we have, like I said, our flowers. And then the other thing you want is something to pin everything down. You're going to want to press your stack of flowers and paper from the top. And I usually don't use my cast iron skillet, but I don't know if you can hear in the background, my dishwasher is running and the pan that I normally use is in the dishwasher. So I will be filling this with water and setting it on top of the stack once we get that built. And then once we've got it boiling for a while and we set it to simmer or to soak, I'll just be adding a little bit of plain white vinegar. No measurements, I just sort of dump it in. So let me get my stuff organized here and then we will get started with layering our flowers and leaves. The other thing I want to mention though, and I'm probably going to mention this a couple of times, is make sure, because unless you are a botanist and you know all about plants and flowers and herbs and stuff, you just want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, because who knows, with the steam that comes up from this stuff, it smells really, really good, but you just want to be careful, make sure you have some ventilation going. All right, see you in a minute. Okay, so here's where the fun begins. Let's start stacking our paper, and I'm going to use, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to use one of my heavier sheets of cardstock in the bottom, just to give it a little bit of a structure, but you don't have to. You could just use whatever paper you want. And then it's just a matter of layering. I did pick up some leaves. The leaves are kind of interesting. If they're too dry, they're not going to work. If they're too green, they probably won't work. But if you catch them right in the middle, sometimes you can get some really beautiful prints off of leaves. I think we'll throw those off on the boil last. So you can do this very nicely if you'd like to, all arranged artistically. But I'm going to try to keep the time of this video down. And I'm just going to start throwing my stacks of items on here, and you are just going to mush it down. That's all you're going to do, just mush it down. You want to keep your thickness of your petals thin. What I mean by that is if the flower is too thick, like say you've got a big center of your flower, it will dent the paper, which is an effect I actually really like, but it might not be what you're going for if you don't want your paper bent up. I don't think this leaf is going to work because it's already breaking, but I'm going to throw it on there anyway because it's really not going to hurt anything. And I'm just going to smush it down and move on to some next items. Got a couple of leaves. I'm going to let that fall off the edge a little bit. This is somewhat of a thicker flower. I'm probably just going to have that go face down. Save the leaves for later. Maybe throw some of these guys on there. This is, I think, from I think it's called a wedding bouquet bush, or something like that. I'm not really sure. And I think this is alyssum. I don't actually know. Doesn't really matter. We don't know the names of the plants unless, of course, you're handling poison ivy, and then that's not really very good. So throw some more of this on, throw some leaves off. I saw someone one time talk about how it's actually a little bit artistic looking if the leaves go off the page a little bit. And I'm actually going to have these buds go off the page a little bit just because they're so thick that they do distort the paper a little bit when you're using it. So I'm going to just let those hang out. They're going to hang out over there. They'll be just fine. They've got a buddy. They're going to hang out. Okay, so I'm going to throw another leaf on. I think this is a bachelor button. Not sure. I think after all these years of gardening, that I would know a little bit more about what flowers I have in my garden, but I never seem to remember what they are. I'm going to try something other than just plain white paper. I'm going to go with a little bit of cream. I think it's from the feel of it, it's just a regular white paper, but it's a cream colored instead of white. I've got some leafy things. The interesting thing about leaves and flowers is they almost have a positive and negative side, and you never really know which side of the leaf is going to give you a better print, the front or the back. Now, I have used this flower before, and I don't think the petals actually give us very much color at all, but we're going to try it again anyway. And you're just going to keep mushing it down. We're going to keep throwing different flowers on here. This will make a dent in the paper because, as you can see, it's pretty thick. If you wanted to, we could split that open and put that down. I believe that's a flower that will give us some nice color. And I don't think these give us much color at all, but what the heck? We're going to try. This is some linen paper, like resume paper. This is a bit dried. I don't think these leaves will leave a print because they're past what I would say I've had success with before. They're just so dry and brittle. But like I said, we're just going for it today. We're just gonna throw stuff on here. It's a beautiful day. I actually got the house to myself for a minute, which basically never happens, ever, in the history of the world. I suppose it'll happen more when we become empty nesters, which will be in a couple of years, but until then, when I get the house to myself, try to make the most of it. Ooh, I can hear the crunching. I think some of those leaves are really dry. So I'm going a little fast just because I want to, like I said, try to keep the length of the video down, but you don't really have to do this slowly either. You can do this at whatever pace you like. But since I did just do one of these yesterday, I'm just kind of tossing it on here willy-nilly. So I like willy-nilly. I'm going to try some of the different paper, some of this white paper. I'm not sure if you can see. It has a bit of a texture to it with the lines going across, and I've never used it in a boil before, but I thought it would be really cool. if something turned out on it, because it is such a neat paper, I thought it would be cool to see how it would pick up the effects of different plants and flowers and leaves. So when I say I have the house to myself, I mean my husband's still here, which is a good thing. But he was told I was going to be recording, and he's trying really, really, really hard to be quiet because he's a nice person and wants his wife to be happy. But it is kind of funny because I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be recording. You know, I just started doing this YouTube stuff, and he's trying. But you know, we're still living our life here. We can't just stop everything for me. Although I would like that to happen. I'd love it if things would just stop for me. Ooh, I did find this outside. I think it's a daylily. We're gonna see what happens with that. Ooh, stay on there. I'm gonna probably start throwing on a few more of the leaves after I get some of these flowers down. I think this yellow is one that really throws off some nice color. Squish it down. I'm gonna split this one open so it lays a little bit flatter. I don't think we'll get a lot of color off the green leaves, but when you do get color off of leaves, oh, it's so pretty. The patterns are just gorgeous. So, you know, we're not really out a whole lot if it doesn't work, because the paper will have a nice tint to it anyway. And now we're just going to do things a little bit, well, let's be honest. I've been doing things a little bit kind of crazy ever since we started the video, but that's okay. This is my day to play. I don't have anybody in the kitchen. I don't have anyone asking me for a snack or what's for dinner. Not that I won't miss that, I'm sure, as the years go on, but for right now, it's kind of a treat. Got the kitchen to myself. I'm gonna try some of this cardstock cream paper a little bit too. So I'm just gonna throw some of these leaves on here. Probably don't need this big twig, but that's okay. Just get that out of there. And again, I'm not sure if these leaves are too far gone to get any color out of them, but what the heck, we're gonna try it. And then this is a little bit more of a heavy cardstock that we're going to try to put in there. And throw some more of these flowers. Even if we don't get color out of these flowers, sometimes you still get the print or the outline of them, and that's really pretty. So I'll throw some more on here. Just keep squishing it down, people. You just keep squishing it down. Some people put everything down in like a really nice artistic way, but not me. No. I just don't do artistic, although it usually ends up turning out really cool anyway. So what the heck? What the heck? Squish. It's the squish method. We have a lot of methods on here. Squishing is one of them. There's a bug. All right. I'm a gardener. I don't particularly like bugs. I'm going to give you a chance to run for it. I will not boil him. That's just mean. But I don't have to like him either. Throw this in there. Throw the rest of these leaves on here. I want to make sure that any flower with color that I collected gets in the pot, because I don't want to waste one bit of it. Well, and then, okay, you need to run away. Oh, all right. I'm sorry, buddy. He didn't make it. I tried shooing him away and that didn't work out, but I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, Mr. Bug. Didn't mean for that to happen. All right. Almost done with this part. And we'll just throw some more guys on here. I got this guy. What the heck? We're going to throw him on the top. And then I am just going to top it off with one more piece of, I think I want to do this white paper and just see what I get on the top. So now that we've got this all in here, we will be filling this pot up and putting it on there to squish it. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to use this board just on the top to make it flatter and hopefully press it more. I'm going to fill the pan up with just plain water, and then I'm going to fill this with water to weight it down, and then we're going to put it on the stove and we're going to bring it to a boil. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I did want to mention something that I neglected to do before. When you are filling up this pan with water, your base pan of water, couple of things. You're going to want to make sure that you already have your weight on top of it. Otherwise, you're going to fill this up with water and everything's going to float out of what you just took all the time to put in that paper. So, should have mentioned that before, but you want to fill up your weight first. I ended up putting a second board in the top. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I ended up putting a second board in the top just to more evenly distribute weight across the entire length of the paper. When I was using this particular pot, as you can see, it stopped short of the ends of the paper and those were kind of floating up a little bit. So I just threw the boards in. I thought I didn't really want to use the boards this time, but I have to because I needed to keep it down. So I've got this filled with water. I've got this filled with enough water to cover the paper, but not so full that when it starts to boil, it's going to boil over. Although, let's face it, I've boiled over many, many times and had to clean the oven. It's not too horrible. But still, if you can avoid it, that's great. So any weight I can add to this, I'm going to add. So I'm even going to throw the cover of this on. I've got both burners going, and now I'm just going to wait for it to boil. And once it starts to boil, I'm going to boil it for 45 minutes, maybe 30 to 45 minutes. Then I'll probably let it simmer for a while, maybe another half an hour. Just turn the heat all the way down to simmer. And then I shut off the flame. And if it's the end of the day, I'll let that sit overnight and soak and leave this on it, staying pressed down. Or since it's only about middle of the afternoon, I will probably be too impatient to wait. And I know I have a lot of stuff going on tomorrow, so I won't have time to pull it apart tomorrow. So I will probably pull this apart later tonight. So I'm going to let this boil, then I'm going to turn it down to simmer. And then once it's simmered for a while, I'm going to turn all the heat off, and then I'll be back at around 7 or 8 o'clock tonight to start taking it apart. So I'll see you then. Okay, we've been boiling for about 30 to 45 minutes, somewhere in there. So I am going to turn my heat down to the lowest setting, and I'm going to let that go for maybe I'll let it sit for another 30 minutes, maybe another hour, and then I'll turn it off and I'll just let it sit for the night. So for right now, we'll just have that go low. You can see the water's a little bit of a murkier color. I think that's a little bit of the wood pulling that color out in the water. I'm not sure how much you can actually see, but it is kind of dark, kind of a really dark tea colored. So we'll just let that simmer now, and we'll come back in just a little bit. Okay, the boil and the simmer is done, and now I'm just going to add a little bit of vinegar to set whatever colors came out of the foliage. So again, I don't really do a lot of measuring. So I just pour a little bit in there, maybe pour a little bit in there. I would say that's somewhere between a half to 3/4 of a cup. I don't know that I ever received any measures for that, but you can still see that this is still pressed down on it, but my burners are off. It's about 4 in the afternoon or 4:30 in the afternoon, and I will let this sit for another 4 or 5 hours probably before I take it apart. Okay, see you in a little bit.